Okay, so next we've got the essay pattern, discuss advantages and disadvantages, and do the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. Okay, so it's asking you to sort of say some people think A, some people think B, but then you have to come to some kind of judgment. What do you think? Do you think it's better or do you think it's worse? So one thing a lot of candidates tend to do with this pattern of question is they sort of say some people think A, some people think B. In conclusion, I agree with A. The advantages outweigh the disadvantages, and then finish. But the key part of this question that a lot of candidates don't answer is why. Why do the advantages outweigh the disadvantages? So some people think cats are better than dogs. Some people think dogs are better than cats. In conclusion, dogs are better than cats. But you didn't explain why why dogs are better than cats, you know? So it would be something like, although cats are cheaper and easier to look after than dogs, the benefits of dogs in terms of social ability, in terms of their training to help people with disabilities, proves that dogs are far superior to cats. Okay? So a lot of candidates tend to miss out the sort of evaluative judgment part of these essay topics. So that's something I always sort of remind my students that you need to explain why something outweighs something else. Okay, so the topic is, some experts believe that it is better for children to begin learning a foreign language at primary school rather than secondary school in primary school. Do the advantages of this outweigh the disadvantages? Okay. So this is a sort of topic we've sort of seen before. This is quite a common topic that might come up. So it's definitely something you should think about before you go into your IELTS, because it's a sort of easy topic that could come up either in your speaking or in your writing. And let's see what this candidate has done. So in the introduction, it is certainly true that an ability to speak multiple languages has become significantly important in modern society. Therefore, the parents want to teach a foreign language to their children as early as possible. There are obvious advantages to this trend, although it could lead to some problems. Okay, so these first couple of sentences, these first two sentences, I really like. I think this is great. They sort of lay out the background information. They lay out the sort of debate topic, teaching children languages early. The only issue I have is with the very final sentence. There are obvious advantages to this trend, and such as, give me a hint about what you're going to talk about, although it could lead to some problems, such as. Okay, so that would be stronger. And then even stronger still would be, you need to tell me, what's your opinion? Do the advantages outweigh the disadvantages? That's something you need to tell me in the introduction. Okay, so a way I commonly tell my students to phrase this sentence in their introductions is to say something like, although there are obvious advantages to this trend, such as exposure to foreign cultures, it can lead to some significant problems or to some serious problems, such as confusion with their native language and slow development of reading, So if you'd phrase the sentence like that, like, although advantages, there are some serious problems, such as, then you're not only giving me your subtopics, you're not only telling me what you're going to be discussing in the rest of your essay, but you're also making your opinion very clear to me. Okay, so I always advise that to my students. So let's look at the first paragraph. There are two main drawbacks to learning foreign languages in elementary school. One of the obvious disadvantages is that students who learn a foreign language in elementary school could be confused with their mother tongue because they are still acquiring their native language. This is a really good phrase. They are still acquiring their native language. Very good vocabulary. I like acquiring very much. In other words, when those children want to express some words in their language, they might easily come up with a word from a language that they are learning now. Okay. Another negative aspect is that learning a foreign language in earlier age, at an earlier age, can interrupt the establishment of children's identity. This is because language is one of the essential ways to establish identity, and children can gain their culture and traditions through their native language. Okay, so I really like this paragraph. They've set out their two drawbacks, their two disadvantages. And so one of the dangers that a lot of students do is that they don't spend enough time explaining both disadvantages. They say disadvantage 1 is this, disadvantage 2 is this. But this candidate has explained in a little bit more detail why this is the disadvantage, okay? So they've got one of the obvious disadvantages is that it can confuse people who are still learning their native language. And then they've expanded. In other words, those children want to express some words in their language, they might easily come up with a word for the language they're learning now. Okay, so they've given a sort of example of what they mean about how this might be an actual disadvantage. So I'm like, okay, I understand why it's a disadvantage, because you might get confused when you're trying to speak. Then they go into the second one. They talk about identity, and then they explain why is this a disadvantage, because language is really fundamental to the establishment of your cultural identity or your heritage, you know? And I'm like, okay, that's logical. I agree with that. Grammar's pretty good. We've got some nice vocabulary in here. I like establishing is a good link. We always use establish and identity usually come together. I think this is reasonably solid. It's not like outstanding vocabulary, but the grammar is reasonably solid, the vocabulary is reasonably solid, and the explanation and the task achievement are good. Okay. Next, on the other hand, there are several benefits to learning different languages in primary school. Firstly, it is an ideal time to learn a foreign language. It is an ideal in their childhood. Firstly, so this should be childhood. Put the it too soon. Firstly, childhood is an ideal time to learn a foreign language. According to research, it would be according to a study, but according to research in general, the primary school students acquire a foreign language 2 times faster than secondary school students. This should be really be written 2 times faster, or it should be twice as fast. Could also be a way to write it. Another advantage is that it helps primary school students to put things in perspective by learning a foreign language. This is because generally people have more opportunities to experience foreign culture and tradition when they learn a different language. Okay, again, like this is reasonably, solid. I don't have too many problems with this. We've got sort of them trying to write a slightly longer, more complex sentence. Let me just have a look and see if I can find any more examples of complex sentences. Let's have a look for complex sentence in this one. Could be confusing. Yeah, no, we have a complex, sort of more complex sentence over here. Okay, so I was just thinking, like, my first thought was like we've got a couple of sort of shorter sentences, and where have we got the complex sentences coming in? They do a couple. The grammar is pretty solid. The communication is very good. Their argument is very clear and easy for me to follow. Why is it easy for me to follow? Because it's a very logical argument, and they've explained with a good example why this thing they're talking about is an advantage. I would have liked them to have expanded this point a little bit more about sort of exposure to cultures, or maybe some studies about, learning a second language making students less prejudiced or something like that. You could have leveled up your vocabulary a little bit by expanding a little bit more. And then also what's missing from these 2 first paragraphs is the writer's opinion. Which side does the candidate agree with? Which one outweighs the other? So the only way that you can evaluate that kind of thing is saying, the weakness of one of the arguments. So you can say there are 2 main drawbacks, but one of these drawbacks isn't really that serious. Or you say there are several advantages. However, one of these advantages is actually a very weak advantage. Okay, and that's how you can sort of evaluate between these 2 sides. So when we get to their conclusion, in conclusion, it seems to me that it is more beneficial for children to start learning a foreign language in primary school. Well, there are some drawbacks mentioned above. Okay, so my issue with this conclusion, first off, it's short. Your conclusion needs to be longer than 1 sentence. It should be at least 2 sentences. There are some drawbacks mentioned above, but this person has just said, I agree that it's beneficial to learn a language at primary school, but they've not explained to me why. Why do they think the benefits are more important than the drawbacks? So they're saying, the benefits of, for example, being exposed to other cultures is more significant than the drawbacks of potentially being confused about your native language. They need to explain that to me, either with one sentence here in the conclusion, or what they really should is be showing me throughout the essay which side they agree with. And that sort of can be solved with a little bit of planning at the start and thinking about the order in which you're going to put your information. And so then you can start to argue throughout why the advantages outweigh the disadvantages. It's not enough just to say, therefore it's better to learn a foreign language in primary school. You're supposed to be arguing to be why that's true or why you think that. So I think there's a lot of good things about this essay. In terms of grammar, the grammar is pretty solid. I would have liked to have seen a more mix of sort of sentence styles. So I think overall in terms of grammar, I'd want to sort of give a 6. Reasonably accurate. Communication was very clear. In terms of vocabulary, I feel like they could have used some more like eye-catching vocabulary, some more interesting vocabulary out there. In terms of coherence and cohesion, the paragraphed well. They gave their opinion in the introduction. Their opinion in their introduction was the same as their opinion in their conclusion. There was a sort of nice build to it. There was sort of linking. The information was sequenced logically. So I would sort of give an overall 6 for that. And in terms of task achievement, again, I would give a solid 6 because they have sort of followed the basic essay structure. But like I just talked about, I would have liked to have seen them putting their opinion sprinkled throughout the essay a little bit more. So I guess overall I would give this essay a solid 6. There's definitely room for improvement. First in terms of vocabulary, in terms of this conclusion, I think is the weakest part of the essay, and I would want to sit down with this candidate and help them fix that. I liked how they argued and expanded their points. Their argument was very logical, but I would have liked to have seen a little bit more sophisticated vocabulary, some things that are less common, words thrown in there. But overall, quite a solid essay. I think this candidate has done quite a good job, and I really commend them for how easy and logical it was to follow their argument, because that's quite a thing a lot of students find challenging. So that would be my recommendation to this candidate.